There's a reason people still talk about how Steve Jobs would do product launches, and it's been decades. And it's not because of the slides he used. What they remember is the moment, the feeling he created in the room. He didn't just get up there and say like, hi, here's a new product. He opened up a door to what was much bigger than the product. He would say things like, here's what's possible now. And he spoke in a way that made people feel like they were stepping into the future, not just witnessing it. And that's what great communicators do. They don't just sell what is, they invite people into what could be. And Steve Jobs, as brilliant as he was, he didn't just stroll on the stage and wing it, hoping the crowd would go wild. There was a real intention behind everything he did, every word, every pause, every reveal. It followed a formula. And at Duarte, we have helped launch everything from next-gen tech to life-changing scientific discoveries. And what I'm about to share with you is not theory. It is the exact 5-step formula that we have used with leading brands to turn their product launches into movements. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact playbook behind it and how you can use it to launch your product launch in a way that drives attention and belief and results. So first, we'll start with the big idea. The first thing you need to do is uncover what your idea is. And that is a clear, compelling message that's at the heart of your launch. It's the one that you want your audience to remember, to repeat, and to rally around. Because let's be honest, nobody walks out of a product launch saying, wow, I'm still thinking about that 12% faster throughput. That's not what sticks. What people remember is the promise you made, the feeling you left them with, and the moment where they said to themselves, wow, this could really change everything for me. That is your big idea. It's not your features. It's not your roadmap. It's definitely not your spec sheet. It's the clear, emotionally charged message that lingers long after the demo ends. So how do you find it? And here's a step-by-step approach. You start by writing down what your product is. Then you ask yourself, well, so what? And then you say, well, what's it mean? Keep going until you hit something that actually means something to a real human being. Like, what is it that creates human flourishing? This is called first principle thinking, and it strips away the jargon, all of the surface level selling points, so you can get to the core truth of why your product matters. So let's try it with an example. Say you're launching a wearable device. Okay, so what is it? Well, it tracks your fitness, your heart rate, your steps, and other kinds of data. So that's cool. But so what? It's so you can quantify your fitness, so you know how much exercise to get and the quality of your exercise. It's so you can focus on getting more better exercise. It's so you can be a healthier person, so you can live longer and have more energy, so you can be around for your loved ones and enjoy a long life. Now, you're not just launching a wearable product. You're launching a product that's designed to help people experience more joy. And once you uncover that deeper purpose, then you need to identify the transformation the audience is going to go through. And you can ask yourself, well, who is my audience before they discover this product? And who are they going to become after they purchase the product? And that's where the emotional weight lives. You're not standing on stage trying to convince people that your wearable is better than theirs. That's not the story. The story is about someone in your audience who wants to keep up with their kids. They want to stay active. They want to feel strong, and they want to live with energy well into their 40s or 50s or their 60s, like me. They want to look ahead and feel joy, not look back and feel regret. And your wearable might be the very tool that helps them achieve this future that they desire. It's not the thing you're actually pitching. So now that your audience doesn't just need to know what your product does for them, they need to know what's at stake if they ignore it. And this doesn't have to be dramatic or fear-driven. It really just needs to be honest. It's just human. What happens if they say yes? What happens if they don't? You got to know what's at risk and what's possible. Once you've done all that thinking, it's time you pull it all together, and this becomes your core message. It should be clear, emotional, repeatable, and it should even capture your belief and your promise, and maybe even your audience's potential. And it's all in one line. So you could say something like, this isn't just a wearable. It's a daily reminder that your best years are still ahead of you. And when you get that right, people remember it, and they begin to see themselves in your idea. And that is the power of a great message. And once you have that, everything else, your slides, your story, your delivery, can flow from there. Second, structure this as a story. Now that you've uncovered this main message, it's time to bring it to life, because a great idea on its own is not enough. It needs shape, it needs momentum, and it needs a structure that makes people feel something. And that's where story comes in. Every great launch follows a great story arc, just like the greatest films and books of all time. Not because it's formulaic, but because it's human. Story is how we make sense of the world. Now, Steve Jobs didn't walk out on stage and dump out a bunch of features. He guided his audience through this journey that built and built and built tension, and it delivered surprise, and then it ended with a decision moment, and it just felt inevitable. The audience just went wild. And you can do the exact same thing. And you can use a simple 3-act structure. Now, in the first part of your presentation, your job is to introduce the audience to your problem. And this is where you set the stage. And remember, your audience is the hero, not your product. So start showing them that you understand their world. Speak to their friction, to the inefficiencies, to the everyday annoyances that they probably already accepted as normal. Let's go back to 2007 for a second. When Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, what did he say?
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it?
He said, an iPod, a phone, an internet communicator. And then he repeated it again and again. He wasn't just talking about features. He was tapping into something deeper, which was the hassle of carrying 3 separate devices around. He was teasing out the possibility that maybe there's something better. And that is exactly what the first act of your presentation is. It's a chance to get the audience head nodding and to show the gap between what they currently have and what they could have and make them want to close that gap. And once you've done that, you move into Act 2. This is the middle where your product enters the story, not as the main character, but it's the turning point. And just like any good plot twist, it should feel really surprising and exciting and earned. Steve Jobs did not open up with tech specs. He didn't say, oh, here's the product iPhone. It has X and Y and Z feature. He revealed it by saying, today Apple reinvents the phone. And then he spent the next hour showing how it solved every pain point that he had set up in the first act. That's what you want to do here. Demonstrate the change. Use stories, use visuals, use contrast. Show what it looks like before your product and what it looks like after. And the bigger the gap is you can create between what is and what could be, the more your audience is going to want to close that gap. That's what we call using contrast to create lift. It pulls them up out of their current realities into yours. So now we're at the end. We're at Act 3. You've introduced the problem, you revealed the solution, and now it's time to bring it home. This is where you bring the story full circle. So remember, Steve Jobs waited over an hour before he said how and when people could buy the iPhone. Why did he do that? Because by then they're like all frothy. They're so interested they were sold. So if you're ready to begin structuring your story arc, grab a sheet of paper, split it into 3 columns, nothing fancy, just like draw a couple lines down the page. And at the top of the first column, write Act 1. And this is where you describe your audience's current reality. What are they dealing with right now? What's frustrating them? And in the second column, right at the top, just write Act 2. And this is where your product enters the story, not as the hero, but as the thing that helps them change course to get unstuck. What is it that your product does to make something possible for them? How does it start to ease that tension and start to set up Act 1? So think of this as the moment where hope enters the room. And then in the third column, write Act 3. This is where you paint the picture of what life really looks like after the audience is transformed. What's better now? What's easier? What feels lighter, faster, or more joyful? You're not building slides yet. You're still shaping the story and sketching the emotional journey that you want to take your audience on. And when you do this first, everything else gets a whole lot easier. So third, you're going to speak the way humans connect, even when it's technical content. This third step is to make sure you don't give people a bunch of statistics, but to present your statistics as a story. And most product launches get this part wrong. They dump charts and statistics and jargon, and they just blast it on the screen, and they're hoping that the sheer volume of this great information is going to do the job of convincing the audience, but more often it just doesn't. It creates noise. And as we like to say at Duarte, if you confuse them, you lose them. And your audience isn't here to decode your message. It's like a developer trying to tell a CEO about, oh, these are all the lines of code I use to build the app. It's great work. But the CEO just wants to know, does this improve our revenue or our market position? So for your audience to reach their goal, they need to understand. But more than that, your launch should help them feel something. So instead of trying to impress with your data's complexity, use the data to connect. Think about what that number means to someone sitting in the audience. This is where the principle of data with a heartbeat comes into play. It's not just about what the numbers say. It's about what they unlock inside of someone else. So when we worked with Thermo Fisher, they were getting ready to launch one of the most sophisticated mass spectrometers on the market. And that's a pretty technical product. But instead of walking slide by slide by slide through every little scientific feature, we helped them lead with what mattered, the impact. So here's an example. This slide doesn't just say how powerful the tool is, it shows what that power actually means. Researchers could detect roughly 15,000 proteins in a single run. That number on its own is impressive. But what makes it matter is how it was framed. On the right, we see a clear, escalating path. The longer you scan, the more you discover. And if you invest just 3.5 hours, you can push that number even higher. This is data with a heartbeat. The number isn't just technical, it's tied to a choice, a result, and to a deeper scientific discovery. And it's not much about just how fast it is. We told a story. We simplified the data and we used the visuals to show how the technology empowered researchers to make fast discoveries, more accurate diagnoses, and ultimately, it saved more lives, and it worked. The presentation moved people. The sales team exceeded their projections, and the visuals were created, repurposed across the brand and all their web materials, because when you tell a clear story, your message travels. And the bottom line is that your data, your visuals, and your language, it should all work together to tell one cohesive story of why your product matters. Because if your audience does not understand the value, they're not going to act. But if they see it, they feel it, and then they believe in it, then you did your job really well. So how do you do that? How do you take the complex data and build a product pitch that people remember? And you start with the meaning, not the metric. Before you show a number, use the meaning matters test again. Ask yourself, what does this actually mean for my audience? Don't just say 15,000 proteins detected. You should say this level of precision means faster research, more accurate results, and life-saving discoveries. Always translate the technical into something tangible. Use data with a heartbeat. Think of your statistic like the moment in a story. What is that rising tension? What was the choice made? What does that number really unlock? So instead of saying, our tool saved 8 hours of processing time, you could say, you're going to get an entire workday back. And that's enough to start your next project. So then you can take a look at your visuals. Are they just informing or are they helping people feel something? If your slide just shows a statistic, pair it with an image that evokes the human impact. Show a researcher in the field. Not just the graph. Show a smiling family, not just the time that was saved. And I'm not saying to use visuals as decoration or cliche. You can use them to show what life really looks like after the product is in people's hands. And next, be mindful of your language. Replace all your buzzwords with relatable benefits. If you catch yourself saying like, it's cutting edge or it's industry leading, pause and just ask yourself, what does that even actually really mean to my audience's day to day? So instead of, we're innovating, try something like, what used to take hours now happens in minutes and the results are more accurate. That's so much more compelling. So finally, tell one clear story. Your data, your visuals, and your words, they're not separate pieces. They are supporting characters in the same narrative. So keep asking yourself, does this support the big idea? And if it doesn't, let it go. Because your goal is not to impress your audience with everything you know. It's to leave them thinking, wow, I get it. I want that. And I see exactly how this will make my life better. And fourth, make it look and feel like it is a big deal. So the fourth step is to make your launch feel like your product. If your product's premium, your presentation should feel premium. And if it's transformational, your launch should be too. And no one understands this better right now than NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang. And at the GTC 2025 keynote, Jensen didn't just introduce a new GPU. He staged a moment that felt elevated and even theatrical. So let's take a look.
Welcome to the stage, NVIDIA founder and CEO, Jensen Huang.
Welcome to GTC! What an amazing year. We wanted to do this at NVIDIA. So through the magic of artificial intelligence, we're going to bring you to NVIDIA's headquarters. I think I'm bringing you to NVIDIA's headquarters. What do you think? This is where we work. This is where we work. What an amazing year it was, and we have a lot of incredible things to talk about.
Everything from the lighting to the music to the pacing, it was carefully constructed to feel like a reveal, not just a product, but of what the entire future could look like with that product in it. And this is what we mean when we say you're not just launching a product, you are building momentum. So think about your audience. They're not just here to learn what you built. They want to know where it's going to take them. They want a reason to get excited, and you, as the presenter, get to give them that moment. So when Jensen stepped out and opened that deliberate, steady pace, you could feel the anticipation. It's theatrical, but not over the top. And many of us aren't that natural performer like Jensen is, or even Steve Jobs was. But you don't need to be a Broadway actor to deliver a powerful presentation. You just need to prepare like it matters, because it does. So if your product is being launched on a stage, it needs to hold attention like any great performance. That means storytelling and surprise and energy and maybe even a little humor. And too often, especially in B2B presentations, we default to feeling safe and sterile, and our decks end up feeling like an internally quarterly update. But a launch is not an update. It is like a movie trailer for the future. So don't be afraid to lean into entertainment, to give your audience a moment they'll remember. Because if your product is exciting, but your launch falls flat, you just created friction. But if your product is bold and your presentation amplifies that boldness, you then created belief. And that's the goal, not to just explain what you built, but to create a moment that people want to be part of. So how do you make your launch feel like your product? Well, you can start by asking yourself, if the product were a person, how would it show up? Is it sleek and premium? Is it bold and energetic? Or is it approachable and warm? And that personality should shape everything from your slides to your stage presence. And then think about, what's the best environment? What's the best place or the setting? What do I say? What am I saying even before I start speaking? If you're launching something premium, make sure your visuals, your music, the pacing reflect that level of care. If your product's fast and disruptive, don't drag on for 10 minutes, setting the context. Bring that same fast energy into the flow of your talk. And always plan for a moment of surprise. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but it should make people lean in. Maybe it's a live demo. Maybe it's a perfectly timed pause before a huge reveal. Whatever it is, make space for something that breaks the rhythm and breaks it in the right way. And fifth, you're going to end with a vision. Don't do a recap, because the last thing your audience hears is what actually will stick with them after. If you want your product to stick, please don't end with a list of features, and don't just throw a thank you slide up there, or maybe even not a logo fade out. Instead, you need to end with this moment. Let's look at how Jensen Huang ended his keynote at GTC 2025.
Tell me that wasn't amazing.
He didn't walk off stage after a sales pitch. He brought out a robot, not just to show off NVIDIA's AI capabilities, but to symbolize what comes next. The robot wasn't the product. It was the promise of a vision of what NVIDIA's technology is unlocking for the world. It was smart and cinematic, and it was also straight out of Steve Jobs' playbook. Let's look at how he ended his iconic 1984 introduction of the Macintosh.
So with that, I'd like to ask everyone to just stand up and relax for a few minutes, and we're going to put a few tables up here and bring the Macintosh software team and one of the members of the hardware team up here and answer whatever questions you might have about what we're doing. Thanks.
Almost 4 decades passed between these two presentations, and yet the same principle held true. Steve Jobs didn't end by summarizing RAM, showing a spreadsheet. He ended with emotion and showmanship. And if your product makes life faster, simpler, or more human, let your audience feel that future, not just understand it, feel it, because that feeling is what sticks and drives action. So how do you actually do that? How do you actually end with a vision instead of just wrapping it up? You start by revisiting your opening. Go back to the tension that you first introduced at the very beginning. That is the thing that your audience is wrestling with. Bring it back full circle. Remind them where we started, but now show them what has changed and what's possible now that your product exists. Then paint the picture. Don't just say, oh, the future's better. Show it. What does a day in their life look like once your product is in their hands? What's faster? What's easier? What goes away? What opens up? And use visuals to help them feel that shift. This isn't about summarizing all these key points. It's about landing one last emotional note, one image, one story, one sentence that crystallizes the promise of what's ahead with your product adopted. And finally, write the line. What is the one line you want your audience to carry with them? Not the tagline, not the call to action, but the vision, the thing you want them to remember a week, a year later from now. Spend time crafting that well. If your product is big enough to change something, your launch should make that change feel real. Because when your audience walks away, they won't remember every specification or every slide. But like Maya Angelou said, they'll always remember how you made them feel and the future you invited them into. The most successful launches aren't the loudest, they're the clearest. And they tell a story that moves people to action. And when that story is structured with intention, and then it's delivered with empathy, and then it's designed to make the moment matter, your product launch becomes unforgettable. And if you want to see this in action, we actually broke down one of the most iconic product launches of all time, and that was Steve Jobs' iPhone keynote. It's a masterclass in pacing, story structure, and audience connection. So just click the link right here to watch the full breakdown, whether you're launching a product or a platform or a whole new category. These are the same storytelling techniques that you can use to make your moment land. So I'll see you next time.